Productive Disruption is a podcast presented by Rhodes Branding, spotlighting bold and innovative ideas that have the ability to reshape K-12 education. If you're looking for actionable ideas about how to operate and innovate your school, you've come to the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Productive Disruption. I'm your host, Molly McGowan-Gorsuch, and I'm the Director of Client Engagement here at Rhodes Branding. Today's guest is Dr. Don Killingbeck. Don is in his 10th year as Superintendent of the Hemlock Public School District, which earned the Innovative District of the Year designation in 2022 by the Michigan Association for Computer Users in Learning. So it's no surprise that a K-12 district that's been recognized for modeling technology usage to support learning in its school community is being led by an early adopter of tech. With a doctorate in educational leadership and administration and advanced degrees in educational technology and instructional design, Don is an advocate of accessing EdTech to support the very human elements of school leadership, which is relationship building, communication, and engagement. Don, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you. After that introduction, I'm kind of like, is there somebody else on the show?
Nope, just you. Happy to have you here. So to kick things off, tell us a bit about Hemlock Public School District and what makes you proud to be its superintendent.
Well, I think that what makes me proud, I'm going to take the question and start with what makes me proud is we are the Huskies, and the teamwork, the dedication to our mission and vision, we're truly focused on what's best for our students, our families, our community. We have a vision of innovate, collaborate, and educate a community of learners. And our team works really hard to pull the sled. And so that's one of the things that makes me most proud. It's just that commitment to the calling of being an educator and working in a school system that is almost universal among our team members. Hemlock Public School District is a small rural school. It's on the fringe of rural. Used to be very agricultural, but as farms grow in size, it tends to be fewer and fewer people actually in the field of farming in agriculture. So our community is much a bedroom community, and people want to be part of Hemlock, want to live in this community. So it's just a great place to be.
So based on the recent designation and a lot of what I have heard and learned after speaking with you, Hemlock Public School District is known for being innovative. Tell me a little bit, what were some of the early ways that the district adopted EdTech to be more innovative?
Well, I think, there's a lot of things that we've done that may be deemed by others as innovative. We just kind of think about it as doing, part of our, it's part of our process. So we have, in 2013, we kind of renovated all of our classrooms with tech. So we went to, short throw projectors in classroom speaker systems, and then a full virtual video media center type of thing. So we could broadcast videos on the screen. We could amplify the teacher's voice, a number of creative ways to improve the classroom and instruction. Funny enough, that the one way that we know by research is that amplified voice. So few schools use that, but it has been clear and proven to increase student achievement by just amplifying the voice of the teacher. So making it easier for every kid to hear that teacher. And a lot of people go, oh, I got my teacher voice. And, save it. Because you're, talk at a normal voice, amplify, spread your voice around the room, and make sure that all kids can hear you. And it's just so important. And so, I think that, back, 10 years ago, we really renovated what we were doing. We went to stand-up teacher stations at our middle and high school, and we're state-of-the-art from there. And then we have continued to elevate our practices from there.
What does that look like in recent years when you say elevate your practice?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we have a classroom of the future. And so we take, if we have somebody who comes to us with some innovative technology, we actually put it in a classroom, we demo it, And then we observe that technology. So for example, speaking of in-room audio, we had we have a very simple plug and play. We have a microphone and we have speakers in the room. The teacher puts that lantern on and they're heard throughout the room. We had a system proposed to us where it was mini speakers and mini microphones around the room, and so you would just charge each portable speaker microphone system, and then you would put these out at tables throughout the room, and then you could talk to individual tables, listen to them, field questions, and then you could also speak to the whole classroom. And so what's interesting about that is, it's a great technology. Isn't that awesome? Like I can say, hey, table one, and I'm only talking to table one. The rest of the classroom's not being distracted by my voice as a classroom teacher. And I don't have to necessarily be right next to table one to know that there's a question or something I want to address. But what we found is, although this technology is amazing and innovative and something that we really liked, that it wasn't scalable for us because we needed a simpler solution for our average classroom teacher. So the teacher in the classroom of the future loved that technology, uses it every day, feels like he's a FBI agent because he's got like a little earpiece that goes in his ear and he just taps a button and says, yes, table three, what was your question? And or table three, I can tell that you're off target with your conversation. Get back to task. They love that technology, but we recognize that for the rest of our staff that it would be a challenge to use. And so we do things like that. In that same classroom, we've placed different types of screens. We've had a Jamboard in there, and we've used Jamboards. We've used just digital displays like 65-inch TVs. We've also experimented with seating and tables and chairs and different things like that. And then we find out, is this going to work? And if it's going to work, then can we scale it across our district? One of the things that we've also done is recognize that if an administrator, a building principal comes up with an idea, or myself comes up with an idea, and we try to implement it, the rate of success is very, very marginal. If we ask teachers, so Molly, one of the things that we do is we go to teachers, and in the early days we called it internal proposals. It's like an internal grant. We ask teachers, hey, what would you like? And they'll tell us. In some cases, we've been very specific. We want to do this. If you want to do this, apply for this, and we'll evaluate. That's how we launched our one-to-one. And we determined that there were certain grade spans that were perfect entry points for a one-to-one initiative on a slow roll. And so we reached out to our staff and said, hey, who would like to join us on this journey? And we had all the right grades apply, but it's a little bit different when they're applying and asking to be part of this versus we're just shoving technology at them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You're getting their buy-in. They're more willing to be ambassadors.
Yeah, so that's been a big change in our mindset, I think, over the years. Like recently, we've changed it to classroom makeover. We've changed it to dream big. The only thing I think is crazy is when you ask a teacher, "Dream big. What do you want to do?" They're like, "Give me pockets for the back of my chair so my students have something to put things in." And it's like, you can just ask for that. We'll get you that. Like now we want you to dream big. And so this fall we did 19 out of 20 classroom makeovers where teachers asked for something and we made it happen at an individual level.
That's awesome. And I also know some of the other ways that you're being innovative is in the way that you're engaging with your other audience. It's not just your teachers. I read and I saw some of your over-the-shoulder YouTube videos and your engagement on social media. Talk a little bit about that and tell me how you feel like that's made an impact.
Yeah, so we believe that social media communication is like a bank, and you're making deposits, and then eventually somebody's going to make a withdrawal. And I think that as an educator and as a school leader, if you think otherwise, you're getting it wrong. Because some people act like they're all shocked when somebody says something bad about them or their school system on Facebook, on social media. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. You're surprised. Somebody's going to do that. Sometimes it might be surprising of who does that or what they say. But as an educational leader in 2023, people are going to say some sort of negative thing about you or your school system in a public forum, and that just comes with the territory. In our philosophy is feed the beast, and we feed the beast at least 3 times a day. I personally like to feed the beast 5 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, a snack somewhere in between, a late night snack. Feed the beast. Make sure there's so much positive that you're drowning out any negative. And not the sense that you don't want to hear the negative. It should probably come in a different forum. You'd like that parent to call you or email you as an educational leader, but instead they choose public forum on Facebook, so they can kind of gauge the temperature of the room. Like, hey, is this really a concern, or is it just mine? And so we have found is just making sure that you're constantly putting things out there. We do a series called Over the Shoulder, which is one of my favorite things to do. We host them, or we catalog them on YouTube, but really the most views come from our Facebook fans. It tends to be Facebook, I would say like 10, maybe 20 to 1. And so, because we've had some of our videos reach 10,000, 20,000 views, like our most recent girls state championship basketball video was definitely one of our top viewers, fan favorites. And then on YouTube, where we'll put it, it might get 100 views. And so but we like to have it someplace where we can go and get it at all times. So yeah, it's very we believe in the digital medium, and communicating with video, communicating with pictures and images are just really important, because that's how people consume information today.
So, what is the content of the over the shoulder videos?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the content varies. For me, if I went back and looked at my last few episodes, there's a lot of content recently from students. I was interviewing, I had a high school principal interview 2 robotics students. I interviewed a welding student who was headed to state championship. I interviewed our 2 basketball girls after they won the regionals, before they won the state championship. We interviewed a high school wrestler that was state champion. And then before that, one of my favorite all-time episodes happened in season 5. And it's, I don't know if you got to see it, Molly, but I'm talking to a custodian. He's our head custodian at our middle school, and we're cooking candied bacon at Christmas time. And it was just a super fun episode. And it was funny, even after the episode ended, we kind of kept talking, and I didn't cut that out on the editing floor. I left that in because it was just such a authentic moment where we're sharing and eating bacon and just talking. And that's what people want to see, is that you're a real human being, that you're authentic, that you care. I think is so important.
You hit on it there too, about being authentic, and that it struck me how you mentioned it's not just students or you, it's other individuals within the school community who are taking that active role in telling the story and in marketing. So I think that's unique in a school district, and also really empowering, because you're saying, we want to hear your voice on one end of the microphone perhaps, but also here serve as the conduit, serve as the person who's going to be interviewing. So how have you seen that improve engagement, or improve communication, or public perception of your district, or what have you seen?
I think it's improved it at all levels, because it's one thing, everybody expects the school superintendent to be the cheerleader of the district, right? And sometimes, I'll tell you what, some of you superintendents, if you're listening, some of you are lame, because if you don't understand that that is your role, is to be the number one cheerleader of your students, that's sad. And so everybody should expect me to be a champion, a cheerleader, out there, just rah, rah, rah. Our kids are great. Our staff are great. But it's really empowering and culture changing when you give voice to the custodian, to the teacher, to the students, to the community, to the parents, and you have them sharing their story. In our school, it's they're sharing their husky story. We end every episode of the Over the Shoulder with so if you were on my show, you're like, I'm Molly, and I'm a Hemlock Husky. And then we fist bump. And that was pre-COVID. The fist bump was pre-COVID. So, it's not a germ thing. It's just a kind of like a fun thing. And so we really want to hear the story from those that represent every facet of our school and our community.
And you mentioned being a cheerleader, and I think in a lot of districts, the superintendents and the leaders in education are being the cheerleaders, but maybe they're hesitant to adopt or use new technology to do so. Maybe the methods which they're using are not as, say, what you would call innovative. In your experience, why do school or district leaders shy away from using that kind of technology? And what drives that fear factor?
I think that's a multifaceted question. I mean, I think that for me, the reason why I lean into it might be the reason why others shy away. So, like a lot of times, I'll get questions like, "Don, how did you know how to take that photo?" So recently, I was in Florida watching sunrises, and we're down at the sunset or sunrise, and I'm taking photos, and a random person was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, it's so they have their photo," and I said, "Well, pull your photo up and look at my photo," and that's what I'm doing. We're actually seeing the same thing, right? And they're like, "Yes, but our photos are drastically different." And it's all about how you position the lens, how where do you put the camera? And so, for me, I learned some of that stuff in high school. I had a video productions and multimedia class in high school. And so it was a skill set that I left high school with. And then, I went off to college, and as an educator, I knew that technology was going to be really important. And so I got my master's in ed tech and instructional design from Michigan State, and was very vested in that and very curious. So for me, making sure that we're, using Instagram, that we're podcasting and doing video, it just comes with the territory. Then when I look at people who aren't doing that, one of the number one things I see as a barrier is, somebody who I think is very much a cheerleader, charismatic, very outgoing, wants to share even way more than me. They want to be in front of the camera way more, is they don't have the tech skills to be able to do it themselves. And so what I see is, their stuff, when they go to produce it, it takes so long and it's time consuming and it's difficult because they've got to work with somebody else and schedule them to be part of it. For me and Over the Shoulder, I storyboarded the front and the back, had somebody else shoot them at a professional grade for me. And then the video in the middle is literally shot on my iPhone. And then I upload it to my Mac laptop. And if the episode is 20 minutes, it will be done and edited within 20 minutes. And so, I try to make it as easy as possible. Where a lot of people take so much time and energy and have other people do that work, and by the time they put them in the mix, it takes more time and energy than if they just did it themselves. But the learning curve, is part of the struggle.
Right, you're right. And I think perhaps, like you said, finding systems that work for you. And it may not be, everyone may not have that same background as you, but perhaps they can figure out what works for their skill set and how can they innovate in that way. Maybe find a tool that works for them or a system that works for them. So what do you feel are the biggest value adds that K-12 leaders can expect from being open to these new methods, either ed tech or other innovative ways of building relationships and engagement?
So value adds for being open to ed tech. I think that for me, one, we're in the business of preparing kids for their future, not our past. It's the number one thing value add is modeling what we would expect for the future workforce. Don't we want our kids to lean in and embrace and be willing to grow and change and model that kind of behavior for them? So I think number one thing is modeling that behavior for your staff, modeling that behavior for your students will pay dividends in the future. I look at our multimedia stuff coming even out of our robotics team and our program there, in the level of work that they're doing all on their own without support from me or anyone else. It's high level. And so these kids now are going to go in, let's say they go into engineering, they're going to be able to take that ability to do a podcast, a YouTube video, some branding type of things into the field with them. And now they're not only just the junior engineer on the team, they're able to take that to that next level. And so I think another area too is that when you're going to be forefront and you're going to take those risks, it does show vulnerability to your community. It shows vulnerability to your staff, your other leaders that you're leading. And if we're not vulnerable in 2023, we're nothing. You're not, if you're not going to be vulnerable and authentic, you're not going to be able to connect you're not going to make it through the noise.
And that's something I know you talk about in your book, because recently you personally embraced AI, specifically ChatGPT, to lay the framework for a presentation that ultimately became a book about educational leadership for your staff. To be more specific, you and District Principal Joshua Chase and Director of Innovation, Technology, and Media Services, Alex Haltom, created an instruction manual on how your educators can be less lame. And just to be clear for our listeners, they didn't just simply use ChatGPT to write a book word for word, but they drafted a framework and an efficient outline to guide that creative process. I would love to hear a brief rundown on how that journey happened and some of what you've learned, kind of, especially as it pertains to what you just talked about in relationships and being vulnerable and being that leader.
Yeah. So I just grabbed the copy of the book. So we love to have fun as a team. One of the things I think when, that back actually in my Michigan State days, when I was at Michigan State and I was surrounded by a bunch of great educators, I coined this phrase. Then they had a nickname for me and everything, but I said, if I'm not laughing, I'm not learning. And I find humor in everything. And I feel like if you're not laughing at yourself, if you're not laughing with other people, that is just it. It's Hebrew wisdom says laughter is good medicine. So ancient wisdom says, hey, laughter does your body good. And so for me, it kind of starts with that laughter and that having fun and leaning in. And then what we did is, we were the Innovative District of the Year for our state, as you mentioned. And, our team, we were talking and we, had a decent presentation. It needed some tweaks. And so we said, hey, we want to take this at a national level. We want to showcase our school district at a national level. And so I said, if we can get passes to FETC, and if we can get accepted as speakers, do you guys want to do it? And they said, absolutely. So the first step is to submit a proposal. So I submitted a proposal called 43 Ways to Be Less Lame as an educator. Now, a caveat to this story, Molly, is ChatGPT was not public at this time. We knew that AI was on the horizon. We didn't know it was going to be available to us. And so the next day I come into work and Josh and Alex come in and we're talking and they said, Don, what are the 43 ways? And I looked at them and I was like, heck if I know. I mean, isn't that what you guys are for? And, we all started laughing. And over the next 2 months, we spent quality time coming up with not 43 ways. We had 49 ways. And I mean, our PowerPoint was amazing. It had moving parts and it was very intricate. And at the end of the day, though, Molly, it was lame. And so it was very structured and very organized. And we don't live in a structured, organized, we're in chaos, Molly. And our job now is to teach kids how to see through that chaos. So we're about ready to button this up. I mean, we're going to FETC in January. This is, I believe, early December. It might be late November. We get together as a team, and one of the guys goes, "Hey, ChatGPT became public 3 days ago. I asked it what are 43 ways to be less lame," and he shares it up on the screen. And I look at the other guy, Josh, and I was like, "Hey, that's a table of contents for a book." And I was like, "Put it in this Google Doc," and he did. And over the weekend, on a Saturday, I spent some quality time asking ChatGPT, what each one, what would we do? Well, how would you do that, ChatGPT? How would you be innovative in the classroom? How would you be empowering to students? How would you? I'm just going through some of the ways. How would you have jazz hands? We changed the name for that one, but so we asked ChatGPT at the end of the weekend. Had about a 120-page book. We've now narrowed it down. We made it pageless, so it's more digitally friendly, and we humanized it. So over the next month, we went through and added quotes. We added human stories. We changed, like, I can't remember what jazz hand was originally, but it's about having enthusiasm and excitement, and so we added that in. And then we went down to FETC and shared. We were part of an author signing, shared our book, had the longest lines of anybody I saw for their book there, and then we had a great presentation, and we've shared it now a couple more times. We've shared at McCall. We've most recently shared at the National Superintendent's Forum, and so have been able to share ways to be less lame.
And you mentioned humanizing it and the human element. What was that one quote I remember you talking to me about that ties it all back to
Oh,
the element?
so yeah. So what's interesting is when you ask AI how to be less lame as an educator, the first thing it says is be more human, be more relational. And so for us, way number two is relationships. And it's about being relational. It's about connecting. It's about knowing who people are. And so before we started running the audio and the video for this, I connected how I met you, Molly. And so, like, hey, Molly, I know who you are, and you're kind of a big deal. And, you got an award this summer, and I was there, and you owned the room. And so, what was I doing? I was building that bridge. And, as an educator, you should just be able to do that authentically. I was doing it authentically. I wasn't highlighting it to use later. But,
No, I can tell it was for real.
yeah, it was for real. And so you go, I think that's the business of education, is building those relationships, making sure that students know you care. And whether it means showing up at their game on a Saturday when you're an elementary teacher for that rec sport, or if it's, sending them a note. It's crazy. You talk about tears, Molly. On my desk is a note from my fourth grade teacher. And so, like, literally, I came back from spring break and I opened this up, and it was a birthday card. And when your fourth grade teacher sends you a birthday card, I had to get the tissues out. And so, because why? She was relational. She built a relationship with me and made a difference in my life that still impacts me to this day.
That's awesome. And I know that is definitely an opportunity for educators to be less lame. And I know in a recent interview, you summarized the whole thing about connecting the relationships and technology by saying, whether we like it or not, the future won't ask for our permission. To adapt as educators, you need to lean in and teach students how to ethically and effectively use technology to enhance learning. So I was actually thinking about this. It kind of reminds me of my own experience as a student, learning how the difference in responsibly and ethically using certain tools like SparkNotes for revision and for editing and just review without using them to plagiarize a paper, right? So how do you envision taking sort of that idea and teaching students and educators how to ethically and appropriately use emerging technology like AI?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing for me is citing, making sure that people know, hey, this was AI powered. that you used AI in some way, shape, or form. I will say that, Molly, the mistake that many people are making right now is assuming that they're not consuming AI. And so I can guarantee you that uh, that reporters, podcasters, news anchors are all using this. Teachers are using it to write lesson plans right now. In fact, Molly, I this past week before Easter, I went on ChatGPT and I said, "Hey, write me a sermon." And I sent it to my pastors and I said, "By the way, this is a powerful tool. You can use this to help launch a sermon. It doesn't mean that it does all the work for you. You still have to get in there and do some illustrations, make sure it's sound. The one thing though is I actually put in there for my denomination, make this theologically sound for this denomination. And it was probably the most theologically sound sermon. We didn't expect to get off on a tangent, right? You're like, hey, rein it in, Don. And so I think that number one, we got to teach people to cite that they're using in this, like, hey, we used AI as part of this. I think that should be number one. Number two is it's not about the finished product. If kids are using this to produce the finished product, or adults are using this to produce the finished product, that would probably be wrong. They need to use it in the sense, like, Molly, I think the first time we were talking about doing this podcast, I asked it to write a rap about you. And I turned on some bass and I started rapping poorly, although a song about how awesome you were, and you were an NSPR award-winning, school communicator, and you're kind of a big deal. And it used ChatGPT to put that together. I didn't do that in 3 seconds, if you recall. Like, it was literally 3 seconds. I had a rap song. It took me longer to find the beat. And mainly because, Molly, I was disappointed. I was like, hey, what kind of rap beat would you like? And you're like, I don't know.
I don't know.
You were like, I wasn't allowed to listen to that kind of music growing up.
Yeah, I've advanced.
And I think that that's the number one piece, is make sure that people know to cite it. It is difficult, though. Like recently, I've been using it to create posts. So, like, if I'm doing my personal post on LinkedIn or Twitter, I'll ask it for help, and then I put eyes on it. And one of the things I've found myself is I'm not always going in there and going. In fact, I'm not. I'm not saying this was aided by AI or ChatGPT, which I probably should do as a good model. Would require me to cite the fact that I'm using some additional help.
And I think that's a good point too, is like, if you said you want to model as an educator, that's a great opportunity for others to see how it can be done and how it can be done well. And it also, I think, reduces some of the stigma or some of the kind of talking behind closed doors about what is this new technology. So if we talk about it and normalize conversations about it, it can become maybe a little bit easier to figure out and how to use it responsibly. And I like your idea of using things as a base to start the work and not finish it. I think that's an excellent point. So before we move on, is there anything else you have to say about innovation or technology or relationship building in the school district?
Yeah, I have two things on innovation. One, the future is not going to ask for your permission, and the future belongs to the nimble mind. And so, as we move forward, the bottom line is nobody's calling you up and saying, hey, can I do this? It's going to happen. So it's going to unfold. The other piece is our job as educators is really to make sure that kids can be nimble, that they can adjust and change and think through things quickly, because that's going to be who owns the future, is people who are agile in thought.
I love that. So we end every podcast with the same question, and it is this: if you could wave a magic wand, what is one thing you would fix in education?
Wow. Can I flip the question, ask you, what would be, after talking to me, without looking at any notes, What do you think is the one thing I would fix?
Ooh, the one thing I would say in engagement and driven by passion and actual relationships and wanting to build and foster those organically and passionately.
That's good. I almost feel like you might have looked at my notes, but the I put down jazz hands because I know for me that when people, connect with me and see my level of excitement and passion for being an educator and for the work we're doing, it makes everything else easier. It makes building that relationship easier. It makes, discussing and reviewing changes easier because people go, you know what, this person is passionate about what they do. They care about what they do. They care about kids. And so the number one thing that I would do is the magic wand would be, to give everybody some jazz hands. And for me, education is all about a vocation. It's about a calling to this work. Because Molly, I'm certain that I could do something else and maybe make more money, but I can't have the difference in people's lives that I do here. And so that's where that passion comes from.
Absolutely. And you touched on, we've been talking about relationships this whole time, but when you say jazz hand and having that passion, it really shows your love for the craft. Ultimately, that's tied to retention and recruitment and enrollment and all the things that make education continue to run. So I think that's a great answer. We're going to get your magic wand and we're going to apply it if we can. Thank you so much for your time today. If our audience members want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, probably the easiest spot is on LinkedIn. I think it's Donald Killingbeck. I don't know. Is that what it is? Is Donald or is it Don?
I think it's Don.
It's Don?
But
Okay.
we're going to link it in our show notes. So
Yeah, so I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest space. You can see me, it'll say like superintendent, educational leader, and then next to that it's beard judge, just, world-class jump roper. So definitely you'll know it's me. And then Twitter, I'm kbeck_edu. I'm there as well. And so those are two easy places to connect.
Well, we look forward to keeping the conversation going, and I maybe will catch you at a beard judging competition in the near future.
Oh, absolutely. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you.